90 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. "31 years of Canadian literary excellence, 5 outstanding authors, 5 celebrated books, and the winner will walk away with $100,000. It's one of the most prestigious and richest literary awards in the world, the 31st Annual Giller Prize. Monday, November 18th at 9 p.m., 10 Atlantic, 10:30 in Newfoundland, on CBC Radio 1, on the Listen app, and on CBC Gem.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app for free.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's cloudy and 6 downtown. It's 7 in Sprague and -1 in Roblin. One of Canada's most respected Indigenous voices has died. The Honourable Justice Murray Sinclair was a lawyer, judge, and senator, and he laid out a path for reconciliation as head of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission into residential schools. Cameron McIntosh now with more.
There have always been those who are deniers of history.
Assessing the legacy of residential schools, the Honourable Justice Murray Sinclair was blunt.
Canada clearly participated in a period of cultural genocide.
A conclusion he knew many would find hard to accept. His 94 calls to action laid the path for reconciliation in Canada, work he acknowledged would take generations.
The public still largely struggles with the question of what can we do about it.
Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge. He fought for fairness and justice for Indigenous people. As a senator, he promoted reconciliation and remained an optimist.
As long as we have that belief in the need to improve the future, then the future will be improved.
Sinclair was predeceased by his wife and leaves behind 5 children. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 39-year-old driver in Winnipeg was attacked with bear spray pulled from his vehicle and then run over by a carjacker. It happened around 2 Sunday morning on Sherbrooke at Ross. Police say the victim was waiting for a friend when his driver's side door suddenly opened. He was hit with bear spray. Both the victim and his dog were dragged out of the vehicle. Police found the stolen vehicle on Edmonton Street. The victim was treated for minor injuries on the scene. The province has released its new strategy to get critical mineral mining projects moving forward more quickly. Natural Resources Minister Jamie Moses says the critical mineral strategy has been put together with consultations that include First Nations, environmental groups, and business. He says this province is home to 30 of the 34 critical minerals for green energy and the low-carbon economy.
That Manitoba has what the world needs. We know that securing our critical mineral supply chain, especially as we expect demand to double by 2040, makes having this type of strategy even more important.
Moses says the strategy includes the Mining Advisory Council, which will help companies looking to work in the province navigate the process. The chief of Broken Head First Nation says Indigenous communities need to have a seat at the table when it comes to resources. Chief Gordon Bluesky was speaking at the 2024 Central Canada Mineral Exploration Convention in Winnipeg. In his greetings from Treaty 1, he says his people receive no benefit from mining done on their land.
We have 0 agreements with our government, and we have 0 agreements with the proponents and the businesses and the corporations that are operating within my territory right now. And I think it's time for us to make a difference about that, make changes about that.
Bluesky challenged the mining companies at the convention to sit down with First Nations and start making things right. A Winnipegger living in Valencia, Spain, says he's lucky he lives on the 2nd floor after flash flooding last week. It's being called one of the worst floods in Spain's history. More than 200 people have died. Javier de Roque says when the torrent of water rushed into his 89-year-old downstairs neighbor's house, he rushed to rescue her.
Her house instantly flooded, and we couldn't get the front door open because of the water pressure. By that time, the water was at about 1.8 meters, so we jumped over the wall of our interior patios and had to get her out that way.
DeRoque says he is 6'3" tall and the water was quickly over his head. He says they were without water and power for 48 hours, but those services are slowly coming back. A British aid organization says all 3 remaining hospitals in northern Gaza are under attack. Medical Aid for Palestinians says one hospital is under direct artillery fire, another has been shelled, and the third has been hit by drone strikes. The group says the attacks are part of a sustained assault on Gaza's health system, and it says the actions constitute a war crime. Israeli officials issued evacuation warnings over the weekend, and they say 29 patients were moved to other hospitals in the territory. Today is the final day of campaigning in the U.S. presidential election, and that means one final push for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Karen Pauls has more from Washington.
Campaigns are focusing on key swing states as they're locked in a fierce battle for every vote. Vice President Kamala Harris will spend her final day of campaigning in Pennsylvania. Oprah Winfrey will deliver remarks, and Lady Gaga will perform in Philadelphia. And Harris's Pittsburgh rally will include performances by Katy Perry and others. Former President Donald Trump will be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. His campaign will roll into West Palm Beach tonight, and he'll cast his ballot there tomorrow morning.
And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
Harris says her team has momentum because it's tapping into the ambitions, aspirations, and dreams of the American people. It will be a busy day for both candidates with a lot at stake. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon for November the 4th. It's Monday. I'm Laurie Hookstraden, and this is a sad day for Manitoba and for all of Canada. Justice Murray Sinclair has died. He died this morning, and there is a sacred fire burning at the Manitoba Legislative Building in his honor at this hour, and Manitobans are encouraged to visit and make an offering of well wishes and of tobacco. And we're going to talk about that first up on Radio Noon today to pay tribute to the truly great Justice Murray Sinclair. That's coming up in just a minute. As you've been hearing in the news, Justice Murray Sinclair has died. A statement from his family reads, "Peacefully and surrounded by love, the Honorable Murray Sinclair passed away early this morning, Monday, November the 4th, 2024. Mazina Gizik, which means the one who speaks of pictures in the sky, committed his life in service to the people, creating change, revealing truth, and leading with fairness through his career." The statement goes on, "The impact of our dad's work reached far across the country and the world. From residential school survivors to law students to those who sat across from him in a courtroom, he was always known as an exceptional listener who treated everyone with dignity and respect. We know that stories of his kindness, generosity, and fairness will circulate for generations to come." For those who wish to pay their respects, a sacred fire to help guide Mazina Giznik's spirit home has been lit outside the Manitoba Legislative Building. Everyone is welcome to visit his sacred fire to make an offering of tobacco and send him your best wishes. Out of respect for his journey for the next few days, the family respectfully asks others across the country, please do not light any other fires for him. Statement and continues, "A few people have given so much to public service. He spent 6 years of his life as chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He studied the deaths of children in the Pediatric Cardiac Surgery Program of HSC, and he was co-commissioner of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry. He called Canada's residential school system cultural genocide and gave us 94 calls to action to follow with hope. He served as a senator, an author, and was awarded the Order of Canada for championing Indigenous rights and freedoms and the Meritorious Service Cross for his role in overseeing the TLC. And he was a Manitoban, a father, a grandfather, a teacher, hero to many, and that's how the statement concludes.
There have always been those who are deniers of history.
A respected elder and statesman, Murray Sinclair laid the path for reconciliation in Canada.
And this nation must never forget what it once did to its most vulnerable people.
A member of Peguis First Nation, given an Anishinaabe name meaning the one who speaks of pictures in the sky, Sinclair was born in 1951 and raised in Selkirk, Manitoba. He excelled in school, skipping 2 grades, was a star athlete and valedictorian, who went on to law, originally with an aim of entering politics.
When I was in law school, I really became bitten by the law bug.
Racial hurdles were quickly apparent. As a young lawyer dealing with a client, a police officer mistook him for the accused.
He grabbed me by the arm and was going to lead me back to the cells, because he assumed the white guy was the lawyer and that I was the accused.
In 1988, Sinclair became Manitoba's first ever Indigenous provincial court judge. After a police killing of an Indigenous man, he was co-commissioner of a tension-filled inquiry into racism in Manitoba's justice system. He quickly felt backlash.
An RCMP officer came to my house and said, we have information that a City of Winnipeg police officer has threatened to kill you.
Nothing came of it. Sinclair kept asking hard questions.
I, Murray Sinclair.
He rose to Queen's Bench and also led an inquest into the deaths of 12 infants in pediatric care in Manitoba. 2008 Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where Sinclair cast the most light, spending 6 years listening to residential school survivors, uncovering truths he knew many would not want or be able to accept.
And the phrase I used to use with the staff is that we have to write this for the reasonable.
His 94 calls to action have brought some progress, particularly around awareness, but many remain unfulfilled.
The public still largely struggles with the question of what can we do about it.
Shortly after the TRC, he did get that career in politics, appointed as an independent senator in 2016. He served nearly 5 years, a platform he used to promote reconciliation.
I've been involved in the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Why can't you just get over it and move on? You just get over it and move on. And my answer has always been...
He turned down consideration for Governor General, citing a desire to spend time with his family, but was a member of the Order of Canada. Through it all, he became one of Canada's most respected Indigenous voices. A mentor to many, including Manitoba's first Anishinaabe Premier, through his career, Sinclair dealt with countless stories of pain, despair, and racism, but at his core remained an optimist.
As long as we have that belief in the need to improve the future, then the future will be improved.
Change he acknowledged would be slow, but remained confident is inevitable. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
As an example of the kind of legacy that Murray Sinclair leaves us, and also to illustrate how much of his life he gave to public service, here's a piece of an interview he gave to CBC producer Leonard Monkman in 2018.
When you were writing the calls to action, who did you have in mind?
Young Indigenous people. We were writing this for those people who wanted the tools to be able to do something about this and be able to move forward so that we can have a better relationship down the road.
Mm-hmm. I guess in your own words, what would real reconciliation look like for you?
Well, I think reconciliation at an individual level is different than reconciliation at a general level. At a personal level, I think it is about taking a look at one's victimization or what the victimization of your ancestors has done to you personally, and being able to recognize the impact of that in your life and be able to turn it around so that you can become a better person. But in addition to that, and for those who are leading the communities, they have to know how to be able to lead their people, whether it's a First Nation, a Métis community, or an Inuit village. Well, reconciliation is everything. Reconciliation is about putting ourselves in a situation where we have every right to be. You're always going to have a relationship with this country, with other people in this country. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want? And if you want to have a relationship of distance, then have a relationship of distance, but just know how to have it. And people who talk about we're never going to have reconciliation don't appreciate what reconciliation is. Reconciliation is simply about fixing the terms of your relationship in the future.
Sort of switching gears a little bit, if you were to talk about what justice looks like for Indigenous people, what would that look like for you?
The one thing I always tell people is don't confuse justice and law. Justice will be about a process in which Indigenous people, at the end of the day, are able to enjoy the kind of relationship with this place and with the people of this place that they are entitled to have.
What would you say to people who think that the residential schools didn't have that much of an impact on Indigenous kids?
It is about understanding them at a visceral level and imagining what it would be like if you went through that process, or if you can't do that, imagine what it would be like for your children to go through that process. And understand that the process of taking children away for the purpose of indoctrinating them into a different culture is inherently a negative process. And we should not think that in any way it wouldn't harm everybody who was there. Even those who say they weren't abused in the schools were still harmed by the schools. And they lost their language, and they lost their culture. And that in and of itself is worth something. The schools were not put in place for the purpose of killing the children. The schools were put in place for the purpose of killing the culture in them.
We live in a city where there's a high Indigenous population in Winnipeg. Do you feel like Canada embraces its Indigenous identity or its Indigenous history?
No. No, it doesn't. Not yet. Canada does not see itself as a nation of the world that is founded upon Indigenous values and Indigenous foundations.
What would be the benefits of a city like Winnipeg embracing its Indigenous identity?
Defining what you mean by that term is really what's important. But there's no doubt that the very name Winnipeg comes from an Indigenous history. So let's figure out what that history is. Let's figure out why this place is called that, so people can connect to that. Why don't we, in fact, teach the language of this place to the children of this place?
What would you say is the biggest challenge that Indigenous people face today?
Self-respect. We haven't got to the point yet where we believe in ourselves. We haven't got to the point yet where we know how to be proud. We haven't got to the point yet where we know our own history. We don't know our culture. We don't know our values. We don't know where we come from. We actually don't know how to be what we were meant to be. So that's our biggest challenge. Our biggest challenge is not the government of Canada. Our biggest challenge is ourselves.
What is one thing that is the most important thing to you, I guess, in terms of like speaking out for Indigenous people?
Well, the one thing that's most important to me is to ensure that the young people today, you and others like you, are able to take the next step with the argument, to take the next step with this information, and to do good with it. The key is to look at making change. And so my wish is that whatever it is that I do, that I have been able to leave behind a foundation for change that will take place in the future.
That was Justice Murray Sinclair speaking with the CBC's Leonard Monkman in 2018. Justice Sinclair died this morning. There is a sacred fire burning at the Manitoba Legislative Building in his honor, and Manitobans are encouraged to visit and make an offering of well wishes and tobacco.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you, when it happens,
and how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
You're listening to Radio Noon. You're at 89.3 FM, 990 AM. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. Coming up in the call-in portion of the show today, we want to know, When does clutter qualify as hoarding? Coming up, we'll speak to a hoarding behavior and intervention specialist about how to know when keeping too much stuff crosses the line into hoarding. We'll take your questions about hoarding coming up in our call-in conversation, 204-780-0893. And the reason we chose that topic was actually spurred on by the story you're going to hear in just a few minutes. A woman got in touch with CBC News because of her own ongoing battle with hoarding for many years, and she wanted people to know how and when to get help. So give us a call after the 12:30 news, 204-780-0893. Taking a look at the weather today in Winnipeg, cloudy with the winds northwest 30, becoming light this afternoon, and highs of 6. I guess we're getting close to that now. Lows of -4 tonight, and tomorrow a mainly sunny day and highs of 6 again. In Brandon today, clearing this afternoon, highs of 7 down to 7 tonight, and some temperatures for you at this hour. In Brandon, it's 2 degrees. Churchill is 3, and Dauphin it's 4. Gimli 6, the Paul 1, in Thompson it's 0. Winnipeg right now, the winds are out of the northwest at 32. It's cloudy and 6 degrees. It is 20 minutes after 12 o'clock. 82-year-old Pat Wong says she's trying to confront a decades-long pattern of hoarding. The Ottawa resident went to CBC News to warn others in her situation to get help. She started her story with CBC's Matthew Hupfler.
I've had trouble getting rid of things, and it is an escalating problem. And now that I'm in my senior years, I feel that I have to be more serious about it. I always had the intention that I would get it organized and get it under control, but often that fell by the wayside, and or I'd get distracted, and so things would just pile up. And then when it got piled up to a certain extent, the motivation got less and less. The action then seemed to be just to find another place to put something that I needed to store. Well, off and on I've realized that there was a problem, but if I was able to find some kind of a workaround for it, then the pressure would be off. One of the things is that my house burnt down when I was about 6.5 or so out in the country. So I lost my playthings and everything then, and then I always thought that maybe I would have a daycare center. I do love my newspapers, and sometimes I don't get a chance to read them. So I would kind of put them away to read for another time. And then I feel that they're a really current form of history. It's interesting to read old newspapers and get really the flavor of the time. When my children were younger, we all were living here. And then they went. Their father became their primary caregiver at one point, and then I guess I stopped having people over and just started adding more clutter to the premises. I've never had my grandchildren here. Feels chaotic, actually, and the prospects of lessening the chaos seems to be something I'd rather avoid than face up to. Getting rid of things that might be important to me. These would just be personal mementos, like things that my children have done, photos, letters, cards, and things like that. That's the thing that I most feel that I need to sort through and see if I could find this stuff and take care of it. These are the most important things that I'd like to keep. And I guess those are things that I might feel, if somebody came in and helped me, might get tossed because they're not necessarily in a logical place. I still feel waste not, want not, but you see, I'm wasting my money and my time. I'm just looking at the physical objects. Waste not, want not. So I feel even if they're not good for the purpose that they were probably intended, there might be some way that they could be used elsewhere. It ultimately led to the situation that you see today in the house, actually, yeah. And this accumulation now has been added to a certain extent by the house that I just liquidated and had to get the stuff moved from there. It's a matter of shuffling it from one place to another. I now have 6 storage lockers that I'm also supporting. Even if I give it away, are the people going to make use of it or not? It doesn't seem to be logical. It might have cost me my husband. I could have better times with my family and friends that weren't kind of wasted on other, this other stuff. I don't know. And then, of course, now I didn't certainly plan, my retirement savings didn't include all the storage fees, the monthly storage fees and everything like this, as well as the vacant unit tax and the other property taxes, plus maintaining them. I don't want to fritter it away on just storage units. It's ridiculous. I have better uses for that money. I also felt that I had a responsibility to maybe let others know the trap that you can get into with this sort of thing. You're not doing yourself privilege by holding on to all of this stuff, and it's becoming a burden to you, an unnecessary burden to you. Why do it? You deserve better.
That was Pat Wong explaining to the CBC's Matthew Huffler how she's managing her hoarding behavior. She reached out to CBC News to warn others to seek help before they face a lifetime of piling up things in their senior years. For those of you watching on YouTube, you would have seen that tour of Pat's house. And if you would like to see the televised story, you can go to cbc.ca. It's on the national page there. That was Pat Wong talking to the CBC's Matthew Huffler. And so coming up in our call-in conversation, we are going to be speaking to Elaine Birchall, who hosts the Dial-In Zoom session for people who are working to confront their hoarding behavior, as Pat seems to be doing. And our question for you, do you have a loved one or a friend or a neighbor who's showing signs of hoarding behavior? Do you need tips on how to help them? We'll have an expert on the show to answer your questions and provide support and resources coming up. Give us a call after the news at 204-780-0893. It is 26 and a half minutes after 12 o'clock. A single microphone, a cassette tape, and a cabin in the woods. Those are the ingredients that became Boyd Golden's new album, For Eden, which he calls a work of solitude. The album comes to a close with a personal account of being a musician here in Winnipeg. Here's Boyd Golden with a song called Untitled.
Got up on stage and I played my guitar. Tried not to look at the crowd. I started singing and there you are, stealing the words from my mouth. Isn't that right? Sell your soul for a ride. Made a little money selling my record. Couldn't tell you where it all went. I bought a guitar, I think it sounds better, but it sure ain't paying my rent. Isn't that right? Sell your soul for a line. For a line. Name your price. Darling, tonight I'm buying. Yeah. Alright. You know, I never really thought I would end up here. I was working at a bar, selling beer. Thought I'd make a record, leave town. But as it turns out, there's a lot to life you can't plan. I'm just starting to understand we got a lot of living left to do. So take my hand, get up on stage, help me sing this song. Me and my honey picking flowers in the dishes, washing as the cars roll by. don't give a damn about filling our britches with whatever money can buy. Isn't that right? You sell your soul for a dime. Oh, what a shame, for a dime. Name your price. Darling, tonight I'm buying. Yeah, yes, I'm buying. All right, let's go. You know, money comes, money goes, so do friends, so do shows. And if every song I ever wrote were soon forgotten, I know there would always be tomorrow.
That was Boy Golden with a tune called Untitled. Coming up after the news, we're talking about hoarding. What is it and how to help people who are suffering from it? Give us a call, 204-780-0893 as we talk with a specialist. You're listening to Radio Noon. The news is next.
Good afternoon. I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg at 12:30. It's mostly cloudy and 6. It's 2 in Brandon and 0 in Thompson with light snow reported. The Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair has died. Sinclair was a lawyer, judge, and senator who helped establish a path for reconciliation as the head of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission into residential schools.
The residential school experience is clearly one of the darkest, most troubling chapters in our collective history. Canada clearly participated in a period of cultural genocide.
Sinclair was Manitoba's first Indigenous judge overseeing an inquiry into racism into Manitoba's justice system. Later, as chair of the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Sinclair spent years examining the legacy of residential schools, but he never lost hope.
As long as we have that belief in the need to improve the future, then the future will be improved.
Murray Sinclair was a father to 5 children. He died this morning in a Winnipeg hospital at the age of 73. A sacred fire will be lit in his honor today on the grounds of the Manitoba Legislature. Manitoba's Minister of Trade and Natural Resources says the new critical mineral strategy will help position this province to get mining projects going more quickly. Minister Jamie Moses made the announcement today. He says Manitoba is home to 30 of the 34 critical minerals needed for green energy and powering the low-carbon economy. Moses says the strategy involved working with environmental groups and First Nations.
High standards of engagement with Indigenous nations, meaning that we'll work faster to notify communities sooner when critical mineral developments are being proposed. We'll also work at bringing in revenue-sharing opportunities for Indigenous nations.
Moses says the province will also establish the Mining Advisory Council to help companies looking to work in Manitoba navigate the permitting process. One First Nations leader is encouraging corporations in the mining industry to sit down with communities in the spirit of reconciliation. Broken Head First Nation Chief Gordon Bluesky brought greetings from Treaty 1 at the 2024 Central Canada Mineral Exploration Convention. But he says right now there are 0 agreements between First Nations and governments or corporations when it comes to exploration on their lands. Bluesky challenged the companies at the convention to be part of change.
It's the people in this room, it's the companies at this gathering, it's the corporations that are operating in our territory that have all the ability and the opportunity to sit down with the First Nations in their territory and start making things right.
Bluesky says for too long, First Nations have had to live with the impacts and none of the benefits of mining on their lands. He says it's time for a reset so all can benefit. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Josh.
You're welcome.
Taking a look at the weather today in Winnipeg. Cloudy, winds out of the northwest at 30, becoming light this afternoon. And the temperature is falling to 3 this afternoon, although right now it's 6 degrees. Clearing this evening, a bit of a breeze and lows of -4. Looking to Tuesday, mainly sunny and highs of 6. And on Wednesday, highs of +4. And then the temperature goes up a bit. Thursday is 7 and Friday is 8, and so is Saturday. Looks like winter is still backing off for a while. In Brandon today, clearing this afternoon. Brisk west winds at 30 and highs of 7, 7 degrees tonight as well. It's not seeming to move anywhere. And on Tuesday in Brandon, highs of 8 degrees, and on Wednesday, highs of 5. In Thompson today, mainly cloudy and highs of +2. Tonight in Thompson, chance of flurries overnight, a little bit windy and lows of -4. And in Churchill today, mainly cloudy with a chance of flurries and highs of +2. Tonight, a bigger chance of flurries with winds out of the west 20 gusting to 40 and down to -3. And on Tuesday in Churchill, periods of snow and blowing snow. The winds northwest 30 gusting to 50 and even 70 in the morning with highs of -2. Well, I guess winter's come to Churchill, even if it hasn't come here quite yet. Some temperatures for you right now. In Brandon, it's 2. In Churchill, it's 3. Gimli is 6. Dauphin is 4. The Paw is 1 degree. In Thompson, they're reporting 0. And as I mentioned, in Winnipeg, it's 6. It's cloudy out there. It's breezy with the winds out of the northwest at 32. Well, it is 25 minutes before 1 o'clock, and today on our call-in, we are talking about hoarding. When hanging on to stuff becomes an obsession. Are you a hoarder? Do you know a hoarder? Are you even sure what hoarding is really about compared to just being kind of loving clutter? Give us a call at 204-780-0893. Now, earlier in the show, we heard from 82-year-old Pat Wong, who has been struggling with the disorder of hoarding for many years. She got in touch with CBC News.
I've had trouble getting rid of things, and it is an escalating problem. And now that I'm in my senior years, I feel that I have to be more serious about it. I always had the intention that I would get it organized and get it under control, but often that fell by the wayside, and or I'd get distracted, and so things would just pile up. And then when it got piled up to a certain extent, the motivation got less and less. I felt that I had a responsibility to maybe let others know the trap that you can get into with this sort of thing. You're not doing yourself privilege by holding on to all of this stuff, and it's becoming a burden to you, an unnecessary burden to you. Why do it? You deserve better.
Now, we'd like to hear from you. Do you know someone who has more stuff and clutter than is healthy? Maybe a loved one or friend or neighbor is showing signs of hoarding behavior. Do you have tips on how you can help them or help yourself? Give us a call, 204-780-0893. We want to know what you think. When does a reluctance to clear things out become an obsession about never getting rid of anything? Hoarding is a mental disorder, but what are the symptoms besides piling up possessions? Maybe you struggle to get rid of clutter, or even though it's not serving you in any way, just taking up space and stressing you out. When does being a pack rat turn into concerning behavior of hoarding? Do you wish that if there was help of some sort for organizing and getting rid of clutter, you would do better? Maybe you've got some tips. Maybe you've helped someone get out from under all that stuff. Our guest today is Elaine Burchell. She is a hoarding behavior and intervention specialist and co-author of Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding. So call us with your questions and comments about hoarding, 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. And now I welcome to the show our hoarding behavior and intervention specialist, co-author of Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding, Elaine Burchell. Hello.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So first, tell me, what was your reaction to Pat's story?
I thought it was sad. And in the 23 years that I have done nothing but specialize in supporting people who end up creating clutter to an excessive degree, even before it becomes hoarding. It's a very familiar story, and her additional stress of who's going to clean this up if I don't clean it up, somebody else, my children, my family are going to have to do this. And it's a very, very common story.
And And first of all, can we define it? Because I could see the visuals of what Pat's house looked like, as could our fellow listeners on YouTube, or if you go to the CBC online story. And it was really a desperate situation. There were things on every surface that she seemed to be aware of in a way, but also very protective of. So tell us, what is hoarding? How is it different from being messy or letting your space get too cluttered?
So hoarding has 3 criteria, and if they exist, if each one exists even to a minimal degree, you are somewhere on the continuum of hoarding. All right. It's hoarding a long time before it's equivalent to Pat's situation. So there must be what most people would describe as an excessive accumulation. And I say a failure to resolve. It's not just about getting rid of things, it's resolving it so that you don't feel a lack. You don't have additional stress to the extent that you then repeat the behavior, or you overwhelm yourself, like Pat's saying, so much that your best option psychologically and physically is to procrastinate, to get distracted.
Right.
The second criteria is some or all of the living spaces can't be used for their intended purpose. You may still be able to do the activities of daily living, but you're making pretty interesting and very unhealthy adaptive alterations to how you're living in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
The third criteria is either somebody is actively distressed, or if there isn't anyone actively distressed, if anyone who had a right to know would be distressed, then that criteria has been met. And that can be the fire department, it can be Children's Aid, it can be animal control or the Humane Society, it can be your friends, your neighbors, family. It can be the people who live closest to you if you are in attached accommodation, because they're living at the same risk when something goes wrong as you are.
Well, let's go to the phone lines. That's a fairly comprehensive definition. Now we know what the parameters are. Give us a call if this is ringing bells for anybody, 204-780-0893. And we have Irene on the line. Hello, Irene.
Hello. Very interesting topic. I have my elderly aunt is a hoarder, and we had been estranged for many years. I didn't live here. I came back, reconnected with her daughter, who has a mental illness, and my cousin died. She lived with my aunt, and, I'm worried about my aunt. The last year, I've cut off all contact because the level of, I don't know what to do, you won't listen to anything I say. And like how she's got some dementia going as well, in addition to a duplex that is floor to ceiling with stuff. When she was in the hospital last year, I took care of her cats, and her neighbors were like, she's told me that she doesn't have much to recycle. Well, duh, because she keeps everything. And I've kind of blocked her because I don't know what to do. And she has had some trauma in her life, and she doesn't want to move. She's 82. I'm sure I'm going to get a call one day from the police saying, my aunt was eaten by her cats.
Well, let's have Irene respond to you. Or, I'm sorry, let Irene respond to you and see what help she can offer you.
Well, Irene, it's Elaine speaking. This is one of the most serious situations that I run into with families. And your need to protect yourself against the feeling of completely being stuck in a corner with the person you need to listen and accept help, not willing to. So it's no failing on your part. I think she's very fortunate to have you care enough to be calling in this morning. All right. So just know that this is not an uncommon situation. So there are two ways to go about it. All right. One is to try to entice your aunt to find out what she would like out of improving the situation. What would it give her? So what is she feeling the lack of right now? Maybe it's safety, maybe it's companionship, maybe it's whatever. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So if we could find out what at this point would be the most valuable addition positively to her life, then that becomes an incentive that we can negotiate around. But if she's been living in these conditions for the better part of her adult life, we're going to, this has become complicated. So what I'm going to suggest, all right, is some resources. And if you go to this website and you have a look at the things that are there, because this is a very, very complicated situation involving somebody else other than you, right? If you go to www.hoarding.ca, I have a whole raft of free resources there. And I have 157 podcast videos about hoarding and the variations of other factors that seem to attach to hoarding situations, all right? Dementia being one of them. Start there. I know that you're going to find a good many ideas. And if all else fails, you give me, send me an email, and I would be happy to offer you a free consult once you've got some background other than your aunt's perspective. So my email is my name, elaine.birchall@hoarding.ca. All right, start there and let's build from there.
Well, I hope that gives you some help or a little pointer in some direction. Irene, thank you very much for your call. And we'd like to hear from other people as well. Give us a call at 204-780-0893. Our guest today is Elaine Birchall. She's the Hoarding Behavior and Intervention Specialist with us today and co-author of Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding. Elaine, I thought it was interesting when we were hearing from Pat Wong, the woman who got in touch with CBC News to alert other people to the how dreadful it is to feel that keeping so much stuff around was really damaging her mental health and so on. She mentioned herself that there had been a house fire when she was 6 years old. She seemed to attribute her hoarding behavior to that. And also she mentioned loving having piles and piles of old newspapers, that she liked to go back in time through that kind of history of reading the newspapers. What does that say to you in considering your expertise?
So can I tell you about the three paths, and then we'll fit Pat into that, all right? There are three ways generally that people are put at higher risk of ending up creating a hoarding situation. The first is genetics. We do know that there is a familial pattern of inheritance in some types of hoarding. Not all hoarding is the same. Just because it looks like the same pile on the floor doesn't mean it comes from the same place.
Okay.
All right. And right down to 4 chromosomes with markers in common. What we don't know is enough to be predictive, because in families, I generally find, 1 in 4 of the family will pick up that familial pattern of inheritance and hoard, and the others won't, or the others will go to the other extreme. The second path is having a comorbid factor. That's just a $5 word for other complicating factor that coexists. It doesn't cause the hoarding, though. All right. I've almost started to think of hoarding as an opportunistic disorder that kind of sits in the wings and waits for you to be vulnerable, waits for you to be overwhelmed, waits for you to be diminished in some way, so you're not really managing, you're not playing your A game. All right. And then it attaches, and what it does is it makes whatever life was more complicated, because it complicates the way you see things, and it complicates the strategies you allow yourself to even consider. The third criteria is, I think, one of the most important, and that is, you're just not the most organized person, or you're so busy, it's always been hard to stay on top of things, and then you become vulnerable. I believe that third path is so common, and that we are all susceptible to it under the right conditions. All right. Now, in Irene's aunt's situation, I'm hearing maybe a genetic component to it. She's been doing it for a long time, if she's 82. And that maybe some of her beliefs about things, her beliefs about opportunities, coming from things, if she just holds on to them. Many people who, one of the comorbid factors is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And you don't have to have that to a disorder degree. You can just be leaning toward perfectionism, where you really do believe that there are right and wrong answers to things, rather than adopt a growth mindset to things, which would be, okay, I've got this problem. I know what my preferred solution would be, but I can't get there. I don't have the resources. So how do I improvise for a good enough solution?
I'm going to call out the numbers again, Elaine, just to see if we can get other people to join in on this. Give us a call if you have questions about hoarding behavior, 204-780-0893. I just want to jump in and ask you, Elaine, again, going back to Jan, she said that she really didn't want other people helping her because they might not be able to recognize the importance of the things, because to them it would just look like all the same mess. But she had things that were very important to her that she wouldn't want to get rid of, but they were in unusual places, I think was the way she put it. So that must make it difficult to kind of march in there and help people clear out, that they might worry that you didn't understand.
Well, so you can imagine what it would be like to lose that level of control, where somebody else is determining, and the worst thing you can do is to walk in and start assessing the usefulness of somebody else's things.
Yeah.
And imagine how debilitating it is and how frightening it is to have to ask for help or accept help because it's enforced, and you lose complete control over things that you are applying an intense relationship with.
Yeah. Elaine, we have Andrea on the line. I think she can add something to this discussion. Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
Hi. What's your experience been?
Well, my mother-in-law was a hoarder. I think it came from poverty. She grew up in poverty. She had about a grade 6 education, and money was always a problem. When somebody would offer her something, she was a domestic, she would accept everything. And because she either could use it herself or she knew somebody who could use it. And it just built up and built up and built up. and her husband wasn't much help around the house. So when I met the family, it was pretty bad. There were pathways. There were mice in the bathroom drawers. But when time passed and she was going to move. They were going to move into a senior's place. So something had to be done. And at that point, she was willing to accept help. I had no emotional stake either in her or with her stuff. And her sister and I just packed and let her make decisions as we were packing. She was one of those people who kept every piece of paper that came into the house. And we took a fair bit of it to her new residence, which had 2 ample cupboards. And we put boxes of stuff in there because she had been spending a lot of time going through things. And if she had nothing to go through, that wasn't going to be a good situation. And when it took her a long time to get to that point, but when she was ready, then she had her 2 closets full of stuff so she could feel secure. And her living space looked kind of normal, like there weren't boxes piled all over.
And did that help her feel calmer herself?
She seemed happy for the first time that I had ever, I had known her for decades, but she seemed happy in where she was living.
Well, it's so good to hear a hopeful note on that, Andrea. Thank you very much for calling. And we have other callers on the line just to get a variety of experiences, but I do appreciate you calling into Radio Noon. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
We're going to go to Lisa. Hi, Lisa. What has your experience been?
Well, my experience right now is, hello, by the way.
Hello.
I'm just recently going through all of this with my whole family. Luckily, we live in a big area, and we have lots of storage space, but I've inherited all my cousin's belongings when he decided to move back. My mother-in-law, father-in-law, my parents and I just moved my mom into a care home, and so I've been decluttering her apartment as well as her house, and there is stuff everywhere, and I seem to be collecting everything, but I don't want to throw it away because I don't know, maybe my brother and sister might want to have it, maybe the kids will, and then I feel guilty because I was just saying, I look around my apartment, I've been having this discussion with my friends the last couple of weeks or so, that I don't even know what's mine anymore.
Oh, and it's taking up a lot of space.
Well, we have a lot of storage space, like everything's out in the shed or out in the shop, and I'm like, okay, where is everything and where's my stuff? But, I've got all inundated with all of somebody else's stuff. So how do you go about trying to say, without hurting people's feelings, like I really need to get rid of, my mother-in-law and father-in-law's things, my mom's things, without feeling sort of guilty about it myself, but also not wanting to push to say to other people, you need to get rid of it.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And we're just getting close to the end of the show, but we'll go to Elaine and get her thoughts on this. Thank you very much for calling us. What do you think, Elaine? What's some helpful hints here?
So, Lisa, who's going to be offended, and what would the result be? You've helped other people by taking their things to give them some peace of mind that the things aren't gone or the things didn't go to a proper home, and good for you, for giving them that relief. But now you're in jeopardy, when their things are monopolizing the space and you can't find your things. I'm a little worried that might lead to you being overwhelmed by the volume, but also the responsibility. And so who would be offended? And how long? What was the understanding when you took the things? Was this for a temporary time, or?
Oh, Elaine, I'm so sorry. We've had to kind of put her off the air because we're so close to the end of the show. But I think that put your own face mask on first approach is a very good one, that she's already taken some action. But thank you very much for being with us. And I'm so glad that you were able to talk to some of our callers. I do appreciate it. Thank you. That's Elaine Burchell. She is the Hoarding Behavior and Intervention Specialist and co-author of Conquer the Clutter, Strategies to Identify, Manage, and Overcome Hoarding. For resources from Elaine, go to www.hoarding.ca. You're listening to Radio Noon, and I'm joined in studio by Faith Fundal. Hello, Faith.
We're going to get a reaction on the show on the passing of Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair. All of that coming up here on Up to Speed this afternoon.
Yes, a sad day. Thank you very much, Faith. Faith Fundal, you can hear them on CBC's Up to Speed this afternoon from 3 to 6. Talk to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.